Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Face Your Ears podcast. My name is Rich Bozic, and I'm joined by Justin, same not same, Hochella from Michigan. How you doing, buddy?
I am good. Thanks, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. Things are cooler here in New Jersey. We just went through a heat wave.
Yeah, same here. Oof.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like half the country did. It was insane.
Thankfully, my studio is located in the basement, so I was actually always in the coolest room in the house.
Yes, same here. Same here. It's very nice. It's almost too cold down here.
But I just wanted to welcome everyone here today. If you're new to the podcast, we are the Face Your Ears podcast, where we talk about DIY, home recording, and other topics related to music and music tech. I am a voice teacher located in New Jersey who also does some recording. And Justin is a producer up in Michigan who is currently in many different projects. But go ahead, you tell him, Justin.
Yeah, so you mentioned Same Not Same. That's a band that I'm in. I'm also a solo artist / producer known as Man Made Random. I produce musicians, and Rich and I work together with our friend Barak Yildirmaz in a project called RJB Music Production. So we do a full suite of production services there. So if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And we have a treat for you in over 40 episodes for you to listen to. So it's a good time to be joining in on the Face Your Ears podcast.
Yes. I wanted to also send everyone to our website at www.faceyourears.com. And there are a lot of little things you could find there. You could find more info about us, but you could also find a link to Justin's Logic course. Tell him about the course.
Yeah, so earlier this year, I published a course called Logic Pro Launchpad from Setup to Song, and it's designed for brand new users of Apple's Logic Pro, which is music production and recording software. And it's designed to help somebody get going from zero, essentially. So if you're brand new, you don't really have any experience whatsoever, it's designed to help you get up and running, learn the ins and outs that you'll need to know to produce your first song. And that's one of the outputs of the course is you producing your very first song. And I've actually partnered up with a friend of mine, Zoe Engelbert. She is going to be promoting Logic Pro Launchpad, and she has a discount code, Zoe30, that she is putting out there. So she talks about her experience in taking the course. So she actually came in as a new student to Logic Pro Launchpad. She took the course herself. And so she's posting on social media now about her experiences with it, along with her discount code. But she had a great time with it, and she and I had a lot of fun putting together some promo material on the course. And I'll put a link to her Instagram profile where you can check out more. In addition to her YouTube channel, she put a more extended video up there where we talked a little bit about the course, and she went into some of her experiences as well.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you're busy on your end there, promoting the course. That's great. Over here, Clevetoberfest is in full swing of planning. I have all of my acts lined up for the day.
And for those that are unfamiliar, what is Clevetoberfest?
Yes. Clevetoberfest is the annual celebration that we do here in New Jersey partnered up with our buddy Mike, who's a local brewer, and we have a lot of live music happening on that day, a lot of beer, fresh homemade beer, and food that everyone brings, and it's turning into quite a gathering. Also, I've been in the studio wrapping up preparations for the release of my next single. That should be coming up soon. I have a project called Bozic. It's just my last name. If you want to check it out on the streaming platforms, I have a song coming out and just tidying that up and getting it ready for release. Anything new with you, Justin, other than the release? Anything else?
I guess I've been practicing quite a bit for our upcoming show in October, where we're going to perform at Radford University. So I've been working on that quite a bit and getting ready for it. So it should be a lot of fun.
Excellent. So why are we here today, Justin?
We are here today to talk about one of the most critical tools in a music producer's toolbox. So we're going to talk about EQ and what it is and why we want to use it. So we're going to be focusing on the EQ found in Logic Pro, but it's essentially the same type of EQ that you'll find across just about any DAW, and it's called a parametric EQ. So we're going to get into the ins and outs of what the EQ is and why we'd want to use it in our recordings.
Excellent. This sounds like something that's so exciting that I don't know what to do with myself actually right now.
I was going to say, the EQ is both one of the most important and most boring.
We're going to keep it real here, people.
It's true. It's true, though. Like, it's critical. You absolutely must use EQ.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where you see the little squiggly line, especially when you're a noob. You're staring at the screen. I've been there. Here, I'll tell my personal experience. You stare at the screen, you see the squiggly line, you're like, okay, what the hell do I do with this? So how do we break this down, Justin?
Okay, so the first thing I would say about an EQ is that it covers the spectrum of human hearing from 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz. So that's basically what human ears are capable of hearing, depending on your age.
How many concerts you've been to. Yeah.
Yes. But the basic idea of an EQ is that the reason it's covering the spectrum of human hearing is because it's a tool that allows us to boost or attenuate or lower specific frequencies within the spectrum of frequencies that we can hear. And so the basic idea here is that we want to boost and cut certain frequencies to essentially improve the sound quality of something, not only in and of itself, but within the context of the larger mix that we're working on.
Great. Now, when I'm dealing with EQ and when I hear people talk about EQs, I hear a lot of lingo thrown around. Can you break some of that down for us and demystify some of this? For example, the one thing I hear a lot is the high and low pass filter being mentioned.
Yeah.
Can you explain?
Sure, absolutely. So it's in the name itself. So a high pass filter is a filter that allows high frequencies to pass, and a low pass filter is a filter that allows low frequencies to pass. And so they're basically used to carve off either high or low frequencies. And if we think about a low pass filter, those are,
what would be a use case scenario maybe? When would we use a low pass filter?
Yeah, so a low pass filter would allow us to carve off high or harsh frequencies, and a high pass filter would allow us to do the opposite and carve off maybe some like gross, rumbly, like low frequencies.
So it's just a basic parameter to clean up the sound on the far ends of the spectrum, it seems.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's basically, carving off those high or really low frequencies in a more broad kind of way. Yeah.
Okay. What about bell curve and shelf?
Got music in your head but don't know how to get it out of your speakers? Want to go from this to this? I'm Justin Hochella, music producer, educator, and creator of Logic Pro Launchpad from setup to song. If you've ever opened Logic Pro and thought, where do I even begin? You're not alone. I created this course for people who are brand new to recording and music production. People with ideas in their heads, but no clear path to turning those ideas into finished songs. Inside this self-paced course, I'll guide you step by step through Logic Pro, from setting up your software and understanding the interface to recording, editing, mixing, and even mastering your music. No confusing jargon, no prior experience required. And by the end of the course, you won't just know your way around Logic Pro, you'll have completed your very own song from start to finish. So, if you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed and start making music with confidence, I'd love to help you get there. Visit logicprolaunchpad.com and start your journey today. Yeah, so a bell curve, you talked about how like a low pass and a high pass filter are at the opposite sides of the spectrum, right? Where a bell curve could fit somewhere in the middle. So I talked about how an EQ might go as low as 20 hertz and all the way up to 20,000 hertz or 20K. And if we think about somewhere in the middle, like 1K, for instance, so you can see I'm actually in the EQ right here. And as I pull up around that 1K, you start to see a shape that sort of looks like a bell. So you see it really high in the middle and then tapering off towards the low and the high frequencies. And so this forms a bell either to allow me to boost around that frequency or cut around that frequency. And so this bell curve can exist on any one of these frequency bands. And I like to think of it as like scooping, like it scoops out the frequencies. And it's primarily at that specific frequency. So in this case, it's 1K in this example I'm looking at here. And it's less pronounced as the bell sort of fans out to those higher and lower frequencies. And we'll get into Q in a moment here, talking about that. But you had also asked about shelf. And a shelf is a flat line that instead of a bell, like a curve, it's basically just like a straight line. So you could think of a shelf, like what you put a book on, right? It's a straight line. And so it's a pretty rigid kind of either boost or cut across low or high frequencies. And so the difference with a low pass and a high pass filter, it's usually like a curve, like it rolls off, whereas this is a hard line. So it's a little more rigid to say, okay, I'm going to boost the same amount across these high frequencies or cut the same amount across these high frequencies. Whereas like a low pass and a high pass, it's a curve that kind of rolls off. So it's like a more gradual cutting, whereas a shelf is a more rigid either cut or boost.
I see. Okay. You mentioned Q. Can we talk about Q? What did you mean with that?
If you think of like the shape of a bell, like a bell can be really wide or it can be really narrow. So like in Logic, I can adjust the Q and that will make the curve of this bell shape either more narrow or wider. And so in EQ terms, this is either cutting or boosting a sort of range, if you will, of frequencies. I've got my EQ here in Logic set at 1K. And as I widen the bell, I've currently got it set to cut. But you can see as I widen the bell, it's now going to cut the frequencies around 1K, either above or below more. And then as I narrow the bell, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to just focus closer to that 1K amount. So basically, like the Q amount either widens or narrows the boost or the cut of a frequency. So this way, you can either focus in more closely to that specific frequency or the neighboring frequencies more or less.
A parameter that is also something that shows up with a lot of these, or a term, I guess, would be amplitude. Can you talk about amplitude?
Yeah, so I've talked about how we boost or cut a frequency, but the amplitude is basically how much do we want to boost or cut a specific frequency. So again, I'm at this 1K mark here, and I can, as I move it up or down, that is adjusting the amplitude or how much it's boosting it or cutting it either way. If we have harsh frequencies, for example, that don't sound very pleasant, we can lower the amplitude or cut the amplitude on that particular frequency. So in this EQ window, and this is very common across pretty much all of them, each sort of curve or area within the EQ has 3 parameters. It has a frequency that you can drag left to right. So again, that's across the spectrum of human hearing. We then have amplitude, which allows us to cut or boost that frequency. And then we have Q, which allows us to either widen or narrow the boost or the cut that's happening. So that way it's encompassing either more or less of the frequency. Think of it like focusing, that kind of thing. And so the idea with this is that what I like to do anyway, in terms of a practical application, is do what's called sweeping. So if you hear maybe a particular frequency that's sticking out and you're not sure what it is, one way you can approach this is to actually boost and then sweep across the EQ while it's playing.
So you're talking, when you talk sweep, you mean actually physically dragging and moving that bell curve.
Yeah, while it's playing. And your ear will immediately pick out like when something sounds extremely harsh or unpleasant, and that can be a clue as to, okay, let's try cutting that particular frequency to see if it improves the sound. So that's a very simplistic sort of explanation of a technique with an EQ. If you're new to it, that can help you dial in some of the sounds and improve how something sounds using an EQ.
And would you say that a lot of those choices are a subjective kind of choice? Or are there some things that someone who's mixing could rely on as a sure thing?
Yeah, I think it's both in a sense. There are some basic things across the frequency spectrum. There are kind of 5 broad areas to consider with EQ. So you have lows, which are your low frequencies, which are going to be about 20 to 200 hertz. You have low mids, which are about 200 to about maybe 500 or 600, and then mid-range, which is about 600 or so, up to about 2,000. And then from there, you have your high mids, which are about 2,000 up to about maybe 6,000 or 7,000. And then you have highs, which are about that 7,000 all the way up to 20,000 hertz. So that's the spectrum breakdown. And so the reason I bring that up is to say that your lows that I talked about are where the sound can, when it's balanced, it's deep, it's full, it's punchy. But if it's too much, it starts to sound rumbly or boomy or muddy. And if it's too little, it can sound weak or thin. And so what the EQ's job can be in that context is it can allow us to either cut or boost to improve the sound, because we want it to sound deep and full and punchy, right? But if it sounds weak and thin, we know we need to boost in that range. So that's the idea behind it. And then if we think about our low mids or the mid-range, if it sounds muddy or boxy or honky, it's hard to describe these things, but yeah, if it's just sounding
I hear the term nasal sometimes used for a mid-rangey sound.
Yeah. And so what we want it to sound like is more warm and natural in its sound. And so this is where we can either, we have too much in the mid-range, it starts to sound harsh and boxy. And so we can start to cut a little bit to give it that more warm and natural sound. Whereas with the mid-range, if it's too little, it sounds hollow. Like if you overcut the mid-range, it starts to sound unnatural. Like it just sounds very, I don't know, alien kind of in a sense. And then like with the higher end of the spectrum there, of course, if it's too much, it can start to sound harsh or hissing and like piercing and just unpleasant, like it hurts your ears. But if it's not present enough, it starts to sound dull. And so this is the basic idea of an EQ is you want to get it balanced. Like you don't want too much, you don't want too little. So I guess the thing about an EQ is it's like the Goldilocks plugin for sound sculpting in your DAW. Mm-hmm. It's like it allows you to get it just right.
Yeah, no, that's a great breakdown. Definitely something as a noob that is very helpful to understand about EQ. Can you talk about some basic use cases for EQ aside from even just our regular mixing?
Yeah, I think what we've implied is that the EQ is there to cut or boost specific frequencies to enhance the overall sound, right? But the EQ can also be a creative tool. So for instance, you can create like a telephony or like old school radio kind of effect by essentially eliminating all of the low and high frequencies and just having the mid frequencies left over. So it can be a cool application in that sense to create something unique sounding using the EQ to extremes with it, if you will, as a special effect. That can be really cool. Mm-hmm. We've, of course, talked about how you can use it to enhance or attenuate specific frequencies like I was just describing. So it's a very common use case. But another way to think about or approach an EQ is carving out space. So oftentimes when we're mixing a song, we have a lot of different sounds that are competing with each other. Maybe we have drums, keyboard, guitar, voice, bass, another keyboard. Like we have all kinds of stuff going on. And so another way to think of an EQ is like carving out specific frequencies to make room. So for example, if you have a vocal and a keyboard that are competing with each other in a specific frequency range, you could maybe cut the frequency in the keyboard to give room for the vocal, or vice versa, depending on the context. And so that is a way to approach the EQ, is making sure each instrument has its focus in the spectrum of frequencies. So that way it has its own like identity in the mix. And they don't overlap each other too much, and it begins to sound muddy and difficult to ascertain which instrument is sounding versus another. That's another way I like to think of it, as creating space using these frequencies.
Justin, this was a great little initial kind of stepping into the water of EQ. I know there's probably a lot of complexity to all of this, but I think this is a great start to get started if you are a DIY home producer to get started on your EQ. So today we talked about the basics of a parametric EQ. We covered the spectrum of human hearing and the frequency range. We talked about low and high pass filters, the bell curve and shelf, and Q, and briefly about amplitude. And then we talked about some use cases for EQ, such as special effects and creating space, along with enhancing or attenuating sounds. Thank you, Justin. That was great.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. I think at the end of the day, an EQ is something that you use your ears for to really understand. I think this episode, we laid out some of the terminology and the concepts of an EQ, but ultimately your ears will really help educate you on what an EQ is doing. So hopefully this gives you some framework into what it is you're hearing, but ultimately I say just jump into your DAW of choice and start to explore how an EQ is impacting the sound, and hopefully the terminology and the framework in this episode helps you in that discovery. So thank you so much, Rich. Great conversation as always. And thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Face Your Ears podcast. If you found this episode entertaining and informative, be sure to share and leave a review. Also, check us out on social media and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For more information related to our podcast, head on over to www.faceyourears.com. Links can be found in the show description. And remember, whether you're a musician just starting out or a seasoned professional looking to talk shop, it's time to face your ears.